Hello, welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist podcast. This is your host, Karen Rands, and I'm very excited about the guest that I have today. I'll describe that, introduce Lorra here in just a moment. But I want to sort of set the stage for those that are listening to this for the first time, because maybe you found this through, you're already familiar with Lorra and you're discovering this, this particular podcast, or this is your first time coming in through the different ways that we deliver this content. But what we do here with the passion and the mission that we have within this idea of compassionate capitalism is to equip entrepreneurs in how to build very successful, sustainable businesses, so that investors will invest in those businesses, and investors also understanding that are new to this will understand some of the best practices for building and sustaining businesses, for growing businesses that can sustain over time and be profitable and benefit our communities because of what the good that they do in the communities, the people that they employ, all the different things, the ripple effects that they have on the economy when they're a sustainable and successful business. And so part of what we do is we want to have experts come on the show to share their insights and their experiences. And sometimes it's fresh new topics, sometimes it touches on topics that we've done before, but it's always new because it's always a relevant perspective of somebody that is walking the walk and talking the talk. And that is characteristic of my guest today, Lorra Brown. And I wanted to make sure that I want to do a brief introduction, and then I'll bring her on. Say hi, just so for people that are watching in can see you, Lorra.
Hi, I'm glad to be here, Karen.
Great, thank you. So Lorra was introduced to me as a potential guest for my show because she's also in Atlanta, where I am. Her company is LBE Consulting, and it's an accounting and consulting firm in Atlanta. And a big part of her mission, and I had done an outreach looking for this, is to help women gain empowerment and change their mindset about their finances. And that applies to women entrepreneurs, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But she also has a personal story as to what her best practices that she has, that Lorra offers to people. And women seem to need this a lot more oftentimes in their role in society as a primary caregiver for parents, children, and being a head of an entrepreneur organization, if they're as a woman entrepreneur. And so their need for some of the things we're going to talk about today is even greater than, say, a male entrepreneur, but it's applicable to everybody. And so her multifaceted business, as a strategist, she works with many different types of clients, plethora of clients around the country. And on a personal note, as a single mother of 3 children, she has conquered her own fears and adversities to build this 6-figure firm that she runs today. So she is walking the walk and talking the talk. And she's even been endorsed by David Ramsey as one of those trusted, endorsed local providers. So that's a phenomenal testimony right there. And so welcome to the show, Lorra. Thank you for being a part of it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's, we're going to talk about, so the folks, set the stage. We're going to talk about, the ideas of succession planning and the 5 processes that, or at least we'll touch on the key ones, depending on our time frame and how much we dig into these, that Lorra offers to her clients, and that she espouses as sort of a foundation of what people need to be thinking about, and how does that plan, in the event of a death or adversity for a sole proprietor, for the head of a company, and how that their business doesn't completely fall apart. And we've all, if we might have lived this for ourselves, or we might have known somebody that has been close to us that has gone through this and seen their livelihood evaporate because of some of these challenges they face. But along the way, we're also going to talk about some of the financial best practices in accounting, and what sort of the bar that investors expect entrepreneurs to set. Okay, so with that as the foundation, let me ask the first question. I want, Lorra, for you to take a minute or two to explain your journey. How did you become this successful advisor to companies? How you gain your insight? What was your pathway to get to the point of owning your own company and doing what you do and being an expert as you are?
Okay. Well, I always knew I wanted to be my own boss as a young girl, and I've always helped my parents with business. My dad has car washes, you name it. He always had businesses. My cousins, they are hairstylists. So everyone had an entrepreneur spirit in our family. So I always knew I wanted to be, I said my goal was to be accountant and to own my own business. It really much so more got that stronger in high school when my dad was faced at having to pay the IRS back. And so I ended up going to the IRS with him, and it wasn't very nice. And I always knew that right then that would not happen to anyone else in my family. So that's what it is. And far as me working with clients, I started out working with a union and doing the accounting. So that's what got me my start of negotiating contracts with Georgia Pacific, which is a large company there in Atlanta, and they have multiple industries all over the United States. And Arkansas was the largest plywood mill. So that's what got me started. Then going to banking, then real estate, and then becoming CFO of a real estate company and another nonprofit again. So then finally I knew it was time, after coming out of public accounting and having that trail, to start my own business, to offer what the knowledge that I had gained along the way.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's I was just finished up an interview, and part of what we covered in that was this. Do you have that spark of being an entrepreneur inside of you? Is it born or reared? Do you learn how to be an entrepreneur? And some of us, I think, and it sounds like you and I share this, and that we had a spark of it because of some of how we were raised. And then we have a journey that we learn how to be the best me, the best that I can be as an entrepreneur. And then, helping others to achieve the same thing themselves. So that I'm happy to share that sort of kindred spirit, sisterhood with you on that.
Yes.
So let's go back a little bit on what you talked about with your dad going through, as a small business owner, going through some issues on the tax side, and the importance of sort of discipline when it comes to how you manage your books, how you set your books up. You do these kind of things because, we spoke about this a little bit just a few minutes ago before we got started. When a company is brand new starting up and investors are making decisions to invest in them, they don't have any financial records. All they're doing is saying, this is what we think we can do. These are our assumptions. And so, everybody's making this expectation on the hopes that this is what they're going to do. And then they start doing it, right? And it can quickly unravel if you don't know what's coming in, going out, what your cash flow situation is. You can get in trouble with your investors. You can get in trouble with your tax man. And then when you go to raise your next level of capital, you don't have just the story of what you're going to do. You have a history of what you have done. And that can be a real litmus test to potential investors that say whether this person is a good steward of money, or, a manager of their money, whether it's investors' money or their own cash flow, or all these kind of things. So share a little bit about, let's start with how to not get on the slippery slope of not having well-managed books, that you can anticipate what your tax responsibility might be, what your vendor payment responsibility might be. So maybe just it's hard. Let's do it in a way of what not to do, and then we can talk about what to do. Okay.
Okay. So what not to do is just shove your stuff in a Kroger's bag or a box, or just have them everywhere in your vehicle, in your purse, just everywhere. That's what not to do. But what you do need to do is have them organized. If you have, and you should have, a business bank account, every month that those business bank account statements come in, I suggest to my clients that they already set up a 12-month set of folders and for every month. They can drop the statements along with the envelope with the receipts in there. And then what they can do, if you have accounting software such as QuickBooks, Wave, FreshBooks, any of those, you can use those receipts to tie back to your bank statements. Because these days, a lot of us are not writing checks. We are in the debit card world. And so all we're doing is we're just sitting there and swiping the card or keying in the numbers that we're doing online. But you want to make sure that whatever is on your bank statement matches what you have as well, because I've seen fraud creep in like that slowly. After you've done that, you want to record your income that has come in, which is what you've deposited into the bank, and then you want to record your expenses, anything that you've spent. One of the things that I caution people is commingling funds, taking your business debit card and purchasing personal items. So you want to keep your business and your personal life separate.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I had a company that I worked with for a while that was really had a very, he hadn't invented a new widget. He just was solving a fundamental problem and had this mechanism that he was doing it, and it had to deal with prepaid cell cards as attached to banking, because there's a huge population in the United States of unbanked people, because they're either because of migrants, because of financial situations where they, they're new to the country, and so they can't set up a bank account because it's actually kind of challenging. I didn't realize how challenging it was, even though my daughter was in an internship over in London, and how much she had to go through to set up a bank account there. And then I already knew it was a problem here, and I contacted some of my friends that were, had been sent over here by companies and were here long term, and they were how they struggled to get bank accounts set up, and so it was. And so, I kind of understood that. And then there's also people, because of divorce, because of all kinds of life situations, that become what they call unbankable, and that they don't have a traditional bank account. And paying for phones a lot of times was that. So he had solved this problem, had this really great sort of infrastructure and program, and it was really off to doing it. And he just couldn't keep up with the growth that he needed. He needed money. And we had got it together. I was working with him, and we were going to go get him some money. And we had investors that were queued up, ready to put money into him. And then we got into the finances. And he was doing all of that commingling thing. He literally had the shoebox of stuff. He had all these things that were out of his corporate, and it was Dunkin' Donuts and Wendy's and things like that he had. And there's only so much you could say it was team meal or whatever kind of a deal on that. And he didn't get his money. Those investors walked away from it, even though they were queued up, because they were like, I can't risk giving him money on this if this is what he's going to do, unless we put a major oversight over this kind of stuff. And and so it was so your point is right there. I've seen it happen. Not only can you get in trouble with the tax man, but it will stymie your growth. And he ended up getting money from a shady character that ultimately put him out of business. And so it was it was how he ultimately got his money. And it was really tragic when I talked to some of his employees later on how the whole thing turned out. But anyhow, so well, good. So that's some good basic tips and techniques right there that I think people should always do. And then, so you mentioned some of these tools. So let's talk about how does somebody, because there's a lot of nice online tools that help people keep track of their books, and there's QuickBooks that has an online thing you can have other people help you in. And so do people sort of just describe for that basics of the person that is new to it, or hasn't yet really started this, or they're marketing and sales savvy, but they're not business finance savvy. So when do you use tools versus a part-time bookkeeper versus an accountant versus, somebody that's going to do, how do those three sort of terms and tools and people resources fit together?
So what I always tell clients is, when you're first starting out, sometimes depending on how many, it's transactional based is what I say. So if you have a e-commerce store, you know you're going to do a lot of transactions because you're selling clothes, then you need to have something like QuickBooks, because a spreadsheet just will not do it for you. It'll have too much overload. So then what I also say is, if you have gotten where you are at least making $5,000 to $10,000 a month, it's time for you to look at a bookkeeper or accountant. Accountants, some of us, we do the bookkeeping as well, or we have staff in there that does bookkeeping as well. So it's time to seek someone for help. But I always encourage people, no matter where you are in your journey of just starting out, to make sure that you have some type of spreadsheet. We always offer those type of spreadsheets to help them keep track of their income and their expenses and their to-do list. And I normally tell new people starting out, just yesterday on a Instagram Live, that put aside an hour. Because you just started doing these things, it normally takes 20 minutes, but put aside an hour so that you can complete the tasks that need to be completed. And what I would look at is completing tasks depending on how many transactions you have, again, weekly or either bi-weekly and then going out monthly. But don't go past monthly, because the issue is you forgot what has happened throughout that month. And that's where we start seeing clients or potential clients getting into trouble.
Yeah. Okay, good. So let's shift over to this idea of succession planning. Wait. I want to ask, so like that spreadsheet that you offer, is that a resource that they can get on your website or something like that? Or do you have some of these sort of get started kinds of things available?
Yes, we do have a get started checklist. And so we actually, if you visit our website at www.LBE Consulting, you will see that they are free downloads. So they'll be able to download the spreadsheet. There's checklists of getting started, what you need to take to your tax professional. There is a plethora of resources out there for them. And then we also do webinars and things like that.
Okay, excellent. Very good. Very good. Okay, great. And anybody that's listening to this show through audio, Spotify or TuneIn, iTunes, whatever, if you want to watch the video, it's going to be available, or it's available on my YouTube site at Karen Rands, and on my link through the blog on my site. It will also be available on Lorra's site at lbeconsulting.com. And then you also, is your YouTube also LBE Consulting, or is it Lorra Brown?
It's Lorra Brown. And
Lorra, by the way, is spelled Lorra for those that are listening or whatever. Okay, so on the succession planning, a lot of times people think about succession planning when, you know, the CEOs and owners of the company are getting older and they're trying to figure out, who's going to, is it going to go to the kids? Is it going to go to my partner? Is it going to go a new thing to think about? This is what my dad did. His was to go to his employees, right? He brought them in as part owners of it and he got his retirement from income from that as they continue to work it. So his succession planning was the kids. Was his employees. But it's also really important, and you'll share your story with us, I hope, for when you have these disasters, if you will, personal disaster. I mean, there's also succession planning that's operational when there are natural disasters, what you do with your business when the building that you're in got destroyed. Hopefully you got backups of your financial records, and there's things like that you need to be prepared. And when I worked for IBM, we used to talk about, how the data management stuff and the operational management on the technology side for succession planning when there was disaster. But in this day and age, because of illness and things like that, there's also personal disasters that can happen that can take people out of being able to run the day-to-day in it. So there's all these things that really are something that if you are putting time, energy, knowledge, money, and blood, sweat, and tears into building a business that you want to create wealth for you and your family for a long time to come, you need to be aware of that you should do this, and you need to have a plan in place. And so, Lorra, this is going to be a really exciting part of the segment of the show, is to talk about, I guess you have 5 processes, but first, tell your story as to how you became acutely aware that this kind of planning need to take place.
Well, I became aware because it personally happened to me. So in 2009, I had a death in my family. It was my grandmother. We were very close. She had raised me. And so I began to go into depression and anxiety. And so then I just totally withdrew from my business, and my depression and anxiety became manic. And so there was a period of time that I was not interacting in the business. My best friend and my youngest son, Stephen, were doing the business to keep it afloat. Had they not done that, then we truly would have went out of business, just dropped off the map, people not knowing what was going on, where their stuff was, just anything, because I was in a mental capacity of where I could not do anything. My depression had me so down. So then after I started recovering, dealing with my therapist and getting myself back together on medication and all of this, I thought about it. I said, the number one thing is, what would happen to your company if you got sick, or a family member got sick, or God forbid that you died today? That is what I began to ask all my clients. Every time we got ready to talk and we got ready to work, they knew that I was out. They didn't know what was going on. It was that I had taken a, quote, sabbatical. So when I came back, I began to ask each and every one of them those questions, and they saw that I was serious. And so this is later on, I began to share my story, and they found out what was going on. So my number one thing is, I always ask, think about who will run your business, whether it's a family member. It just so happens that I did have a family member that, stepped up to the plate, which was my youngest child, who was in high school. Then I also had my best friend. So that was someone who we co-partnered. We had separate businesses, but we co-partnered on clients, and she got work from me and I would get work from her. So that was another thing. So are your employees ready to step in? And then the next thing is, what would happen? Is there a plan to sell it? I mean, people just think, oh, well, somebody will sell it. No, there has to be something in there that's saying, are you going to sell it? How much are you going to sell it for? You just don't sell businesses. There has to be evaluations done of how much the business is worth. So all of these things need to be done beforehand. So I give that as the tip number one. And then I always say tip number two, you need to create the framework for transitioning the business to a new leadership. You have to start brainstorming. Someone just can't step in your shoes and start with the succession planning of that they're going to take over on your business. They have to know what happens on a day-to-day business. They know what is going on. There are many important issues to consider as well. So there's legal documents, all types of things that need to take place. And in my situation, none of those things were in place, but they were able to maneuver because they knew so much about the business. My son had worked in the business. They were able to go back in emails and see what I had written to clients and go back and recopy. They knew the onboarding process because that was something that him and his brother were trained in. When they started working for me on Summer, it wasn't that you just got a cushy position. It was putting tax returns together. It was doing the onboarding paperwork for clients, all the minute stuff that people never want to do. They just want to come in and start running a business. Mm-hmm. So, this forces you to make hasty decisions down the road to have a good plan. And so the next thing is, I say, share the plan. Share the plan with your family so that they know what's going on. Share the plan with your employees. And then if you have a support person that is an accountability partner, you definitely need to share that. There's an report out there that's, according to SHRM, that 62% of their employees say that they would do a much better job at their company if they knew what would happen in the event that an owner passed away, got sick, or any of those things.
Interesting.
Yes.
And that totally makes sense. I mean, let's take a look, because you've gone through 3 of your 5, I guess, here, but let's dig into that a little bit too, because one of the things we advise investors on is that you always want to have a buy-sell agreement, right? So that's sort of like the structure of of legally what happens in the event of this. You need to sell your business to your partner,
Right.
or you need to sell it. You need to sell it because a partner died, and is this person going to take it over? And what about the investors? And that's all that kind of stuff. But so that was your first point. But it's also that how and who
Right.
kind of a thing, because if you don't have that, if you're going to go sell it to a third party, somebody has the authority to be able to do that. And if you haven't identified who's going to take over, say the founder has 40% of the shares. Well, who owns those 40% of the shares to make the vote on
Right.
that process, right? And it's,
That's true.
and investors sometimes say that, well, all of a sudden it's in the will and it goes to a spouse that knows nothing about the business, because they didn't plan it
Exactly.
ahead of time on who's going to be able to influence that. So I want to say to the investors that might be listening to this, it goes beyond just the legal document. You need to get in underneath the covers to what Laura's talking about is like the people side of how this is going to happen and maneuver, and what is it really going to do. And then your third one on sharing that plan, that totally makes sense, that your employees, because they worry about when they're getting acquired and what's going to happen when they get acquired. Well, if they know that the founder of the company or the CEO of the company had a heart attack 6 weeks ago and was out, or in a situation of a personal disaster because of a loss in the family, and they're not really doing it, then they don't know that uncertainty. They start looking for jobs. And
Yes,
if
and
you're an investor in the company, you become really concerned about the fact that the company is going to go sideways because none of this pre-planning had been done and it wasn't communicated. And don't worry, folks, we got it covered to the employees in the company.
I totally agree, Karen. I walked into a company and just what you're saying has happened. Everybody started jumping ship. And the thing about it is no one else knew what the other person's duty was because they were never cross-trained. And so there was a portion of the business that was just left over. And I have to tell you that the unfortunate part that happened was the finances. The lady was gone, so then I had to step in for them, even though that's not what I was there for, and start training another employee to do all her duties because they just didn't know. They didn't know passwords to get into the systems for oil and gas. With Chevron, they didn't know how to upload the different invoices, because each one of these oil and gas companies require an EDI system, which has the data to go in a certain way. So it was like, just a nightmare. And I was there for 8 months. So it is very important that you have these type of talks and that you cross-train your employees. And that, again, if it's a spouse, a wife or a husband that's taken over, or kids, that each one of them know what's going to transpire. And not even that, like you said, number two, all the agreements would be in number two whenever they create the framework. They need to make sure that they have an attorney to outline it. I've seen sons arguing back and forth of who's going to take over, and nothing really gets done with the company, all while a cabinet making company is going down. No orders are going out. The orders that are in there because they're fighting.
Oh boy, yes. Wow, this is great stuff. So, okay, what's your number 4?
So number 4 is put the plan in place to grow your future leadership now. So when you have the plan in place, one of the most important things that you can do in the transition of your business is empower to grow your leader. So if it's going to be your son, you have to start empowering him. You have to start him at the bottom, not at the top. Make sure, like a CNC machine shop, make sure that they know exactly. I go out on the floor. I know what's going to happen. I know how the machine is set to cut out the steel. I know exactly how much of the steel it's going to take that my client orders. So make sure that he knows the same thing. Make sure he knows how to operate the machinery. Make sure that he knows everything he, she, whoever it is that you're going to have them place knows from the beginning to the end. So this is going to take over a period of time. So this needs to happen as soon as possible is what I tell owners. So many of them are focused on working in the business that they're not focused on working on the business.
Well, and that leads into also one of the things that I always tell companies that find themselves in this capital abyss that I describe it as, that there's new ways for companies to raise money now, and if they're in that 2 million to under 10 million kind of a place, and they're sort of in the no man's land of capital. They might have been around 5 or 10 years, whatever, getting to the point that they are, and they may have raised early money on, and then they find that they need to get more money, but they can't go to the bank. They're too small for private equity funds. They're either too slow growth or not in the industry for VCs. They can't go back to traditional angels. Where do they go get money? Well, there's mechanisms to do that now under the Jobs Act.
Right.
So, and that's part of what my organization does. But they have to do a lot of the stuff that you have here, because when you're reaching out to a crowd to raise money like you would as if you were a public company, and you're likely never going to meet your investors. So to the investors listening out here, you need to dig deeper. It's not just about the video. It's not just about the executive summary or this, I think this market opportunity for this new product is good. It's, do they have the processes in place?
Yes.
So that they can
absolutely.
go from 10x a week to widgets a week to 100x widgets a week with additional money, or get this new product out there. And as they're busy, they got to be able to, they got to stop working in their business to work on their business and become the CEO that has a team that can do all these things, so that they can be a well-run machine to achieve the goals and the expectations that when they bring on outside capital, what those investors are going to expect them to do. So growing the future leadership, having this cross-training of folks and these things, the processes documented, is
Right.
so critical for the sustainable growth of a company, for sure. So
it is. And I tell them they have to take it on as if they were mentoring someone. If you were mentoring someone, you would give them advice. You would let them come in and get hands-on training. This is the same thing that you need to do with whoever and your employees that you will leave behind.
yes. Okay, great. So that good stuff. What's the fifth one?
So the fifth one is have an emergency plan in place. I know that this is an emergency, but you still need to have an emergency plan laid out step by step that says this is what's going to happen today if I walk out there and I get hit by a bus and I don't have time to train anyone. Just have a little miniature mini plan that says this is who is going to take over, this is who it's going to be. And in that miniature plan, it may be not just one person, but multiple people. Let's just take, for instance, the client that I have that has a CNC machine shop. He had a heart attack. So who's going to take over in the finances? Of course, that's going to be the CFO that's going to run that piece. But who's going to look over the guys that are out there on the machine shop? You need to have someone that does the daily operation. So now that manager that is managing, because they run 3 shifts, now you need to make him over all the shifts, and he needs to manage the daily to make sure that the whales are getting out there. Because what I tell clients, there's always a bottleneck. For those of them that don't understand the theory of constraint, there's always something that is stopping us. So what is it? There's going to be, just like a sink, you have hair, it stops it up. So what's that one thing that can stop you? Look at that and then plan around it.
Oh man, so many good nuggets of information here. So the bottleneck piece,
Yes.
that is something that people don't think about. That you know, every process management, whenever you do kind of process management stuff, there's always I mean, you think about everything, whether it's manufacturing, it's a sales process, it's whatever. There's always a
Yes.
process, and there's something that becomes the straining point, the getcha kind of a thing. If it
Right.
doesn't
The weakest
happen,
link.
the weakest link. And so what is that? And what's the plan to fix that? Because, you know, it's like, I guess have 100 stories going through my head of people that are be like, well, so-and-so knows everything. If you need to get it done, you know, whatever, this is the person. Well, then what happens if that person's not there?
Right. Exactly.
You know, and in some cases it could be the secretary, you know, the secretary that plans the day-to-day of the, you know, they're called a secretary, but they really are the operations manager running stuff in,
Right.
you know, for the CEO and stuff. And, you know, all that, the CEO only has to say 3 words, and that person knows how to go off and do 10 things.
Exactly.
You know? And now anybody else isn't going to understand what those 3 words mean, and they might get 1 of the 10 things done that those 3 words towards direction to them for. So, oh yeah, all of that's really great stuff. So, So let's dig back, circle back around based on these things. And I sort of set the stage at the beginning in the minutes that we have left here with women-owned businesses. And a lot of times they have this responsibility because they are the primary caretaker often for their parents as they age, their children as they grow, and then as they run their own business, running the business and the employees and all that other kind of stuff. So where do you see what you shared today? How is it different, or how is it more critical, or whatever your thoughts are when it comes specifically to women-owned businesses?
I think when it specifically comes to women-owned businesses is very critical, because these are some of the components that we lack. When I work with women entrepreneurs, these are not things that they have in place as the finances. These are not things that they have in place of a succession plan. Our number one problem is by nature, women try to be everything to everyone. So there's always something in the business, unfortunately, that's getting left off that they think, well, I've taken care of this. I've done this. But no, you may have touched on it, but not done it to the best of our abilities. So just like you're saying, a lot of them, they're looking for funding and they can't get the funding. They're looking for expansion of growth and they can't get that because the internal is not together. They're so busy working on the business that they are not working in the business, that they haven't worked on the business. So I think it's very, very critical for us as women, especially because we take a while to determine what it is we're going to do. Men think very quickly and they don't think with their emotions.
Yeah, that's a good comparison on that. And like your idea of like the quick thing of who's going to do this or who's going to do that, we take into everybody's feelings and, all these other kind of things on versus just sort of getting the job done. And that's a whole nother coaching program. And there's some ladies that I work with that are very, very good. I had a radio show I did not too long ago with Heather Havenwood, where she talks about giving ourselves permission to be this, non-emotional, whatever, decide kind of stuff. And there's this other lady, she's an angel investor that runs a coaching program for people here in Atlanta. Bernie Dixon launched 2X Pad. I launched 2X, Launchpad 2X. Okay. Are you familiar with her? So
yes, I've heard of her.
Yeah. Yes. So she really helps people, women, with their language, where we act like we're asking permission, or we feel like we have to put smiley faces and stuff. I do that all the time. It's like, and it's like, what, men don't write that way. Why do you feel the need to write that way when you're communicating? And so, there's all these little things, and we're wired a little bit different, and it's not so much that the man way or the woman way is the better way. It's the way when it comes to communicating and planning and addressing our own misperceptions, our own layers of what we bring to it, that we change the way that, the steps are the steps, and you just do the steps. You don't have to overthink them and apply emotion and do all this kind of stuff. It's just a step, and you're doing this for the better of your family, for the better of your employees, to protect all the people that we're trying to protect and support as women, and women business owners. And I think back to the funny thing that you think about, like, how many of us have ever had to go on a business trip and we're out and we leave the dish in the thing with instructions on how to heat it up in the microwave or something like that for our family to do, they can't figure that stuff out themselves. Right. But so we'll do that. We'll organize and plan our family and the schedules and all these kind of things. And this is what you got to do. But then when it comes to our business, sometimes we have the authority, but we sometimes feel weird about directing the same authority that we might do it within our household.
Exactly. It's a lack of execution because we didn't get permission from whoever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. So very good. All right. So let's go. So that's, I think we really have covered. Is there anything else you would like to share? Because this is, you got something coming up. You've told folks that you got all kinds of tools on your website. Tell me your website again, and please share anything else that you might want to share with our audience that we haven't covered.
All right. Our website is www.lbeconsulting.com, and you can go there and get all types of tools. And then you can also follow me on all my social media platforms, which is Lorra, Lorra, and it's Brown, BROWN. And so I'm always doing Instagram lives, sharing helpful information on there. There's Twitter. I'm sharing helpful information on there as well. So
I'm gonna go follow you on Instagram. I gotta take my Instagram game up. So I'm gonna learn from you.
okay, sounds great.
All right. So, and of course, with myself, KarenRands.co is my website that has all the relevant information, what we do for entrepreneurs and investors. I have my book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing. There's information on there called the book. Get the book, and it's got sample chapters and a bunch of stuff on that. I have a video tips that I send out on an email, and my social media, big multiple Facebook stuff and LinkedIn and all those kind of things. All of those links are in on my website and pretty much my name. So I want to encourage folks to do that again. And please, if you are one of those entrepreneurs that is really sees the future where you want to go, you're committed to the success of your business, to provide for your family, to provide for the future generations, then get with Lorra and start putting these plans in place. Start as a roadmap to what you need to do, because this is so critical. And if you're getting ready to come raise capital and you're going to come to me to help you figure that out, you're going to need to have this stuff in place, because this whole idea of process management and getting people companies to the point that investors could trust them with their capital when they don't necessarily have the opportunity to drive down the street and knock on their door or sit across the table from them. It's really critical for that. So you're going to have to get this kind of stuff in place as well. So anyway, thank you very much, Lorra, for being on the show. Really thought we covered a lot of ground and really helpful. I took notes, and I got to go do some of this stuff myself. So I'm going to be going to your website, getting some of those tips and techniques and tools too. So
thank you so much, Karen, for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right. So everybody out there in the compassionate capitalist world, like this, share it, and provide some reviews, comment if you like, and onwards and upwards. Have a great day.